Lights, camera, action.
Welcome back, everybody, to another review. Today we're going to be talking about Ready or Not 2, Here I Come. So this is a movie that pretty much picks up right where the first film leaves off, only this time it introduces us to Kathryn Newton, who is Samara Weaving's sister in this movie, and of course there is more to this twisted, dark cult of a family that has more up its sleeve, and yet again another game ensues, leaving our characters just trying to fight for their life at the end of the day. This was a film that I was really looking forward to. I'm a big fan of the first one. The first one kind of just came out of nowhere, so it was a nice surprise. It also introduced me to the Radio Silence guys, who I've pretty much enjoyed about everything that they've done up until this point. So I was on board for this, and I was curious what they were going to do, while I had a little bit of worries in my back pocket, which we'll get into. But overall, I had a lot of fun with this film. So starting out with some of the stuff that I really enjoyed about this movie is I think that our cast is really good throughout this movie. Just like the first one had this huge stacked cast. I think this one kind of ups that ante a little bit. It kind of adds more characters and more family, and it kind of extends out a lot of that lore a little bit, which can get kind of bogged down, which I kind of talk about in a little bit. But for the most part, it is cool how it does extend a lot of stuff and expand like the stuff with the family and the stuff that you can do with certain things. Of course, we have our returning character of Samara Weaving, who I think is just a really great actress. I've enjoyed her in everything that she's done so far. I just think there's something really about her that she really just brings something to a movie, and she does it so well. She's able to bring so much charisma and like just this badassery to her, and this just badass attitude overall that I think she works perfectly for a movie like this, and everything about the first one she carries over to this one, and it's almost like turned up a little bit. So I just really enjoy what she brings to the table overall, and not only as just this character, but as an actress. I'll support her through anything. I think she's pretty much a scream queen at this point, so I think she's great at what she does. I think our introduction of Kathryn Newton in this movie is really well, because it brings like this brand new character into this, who has to play like this person going through all this for the first time, where like, that was Samara Weaving in the first movie. So now you get to bring her in as this almost fresh new character, has to go through all these events that happened throughout the first one. And her and Samara Weaving have great chemistry together. I really buy into them as sisters. And even points where they have to kind of be strained and kind of have these problems with each other, you kind of buy into that. I also think her coming into this movie also brings a whole new layer of comedy to it as well, because, like I said, she's going through all this for the first time, so all these people trying to kill them and all the bodies exploding and things like that. It's very new for her, so it adds like this fresh new take of comedy throughout. Like I said, with the rest of the cast, you have Sarah Michelle Gellar, who I've always been a big fan of, so I'm happy to see her back in this movie. I really like her dynamic, what she brings to this movie with her brother, played by Sean Hannity, who I haven't really seen since The Faculty. I know that, he's in that show, I think on Netflix, the Animal Kingdom show or whatever now, so I think that show kind of took off, but I have not seen that show. But it's good to see him again. I like the dynamic between those two characters. And I like Elijah Wood, the character he plays. It's almost like this lawyer character who's like this kind of quirky kind of dude who's, kind of over all this stuff and has to kind of pretty much is the exposition for the audience. But I really like what he brings to it. It also brings another layer of comedy throughout it. So it's kind of cool. It's almost like these Ready or Not movies so far is almost like another version of Knives Out, to where they try to get these ensemble casts. While the cast might not be A-list cast, it's still kind of cool to see a bunch of familiar faces kind of all be in one movie together. I think that's a lot of fun. And speaking of, since I'm talking about casting, one of the things I really like is I love how you have this sibling dynamic between some of our characters, our main characters. For example, you have, Kathryn Newton and Samara Weaving, who have this really strained relationship with each other. And near the beginning of the movie, you have Sean Hannity and Sarah Michelle Gellar, who are siblings, that have kind of more of a bonded relationship, or at least you think for the most part. And as the movie goes on, it's kind of interesting to see how both sets of siblings start to mirror each other, because as the bond between Samara Weaving and Kathryn Newton grows stronger, the one between Sean Hannity and Sarah Michelle Gellar becomes more broken and weaker. So it's kind of interesting. I think it's an interesting play throughout the movie, and it's a really cool thing to bring to the movie, because I think it kind of teeter-tots a lot to where you have a really cool twisting dynamic throughout the movie that kind of ups the stakes a little bit, because Sean Hannity plays a really mean, like really just mean villain throughout this movie. And I think as the movie goes on, you can kind of see that he's kind of unhinged in his own way, but he kind of restrains from showing it. And as the movie progresses, a little bit more of that comes out. And as farther as the movie goes, and especially up to the climax, you can tell like it just gets worse and worse and worse. So you can tell this character is starting to slowly become unhinged. So, but it was cool to see those sibling dynamics play off of each other and how they kind of twist and turn as the movie goes. I also really like the setting of this new movie. I know as sequels go, you kind of have to go bigger and better and stuff like that. And this one is kind of more set in this like country club golf course type thing. So you get more stuff outside, you get more, mobility of them moving around in different places, driving on golf courts and stuff like that. And then of course they have to go into the resort at some point in time to kind of, run around in there, which leads to different rooms, which leads to more different kinds of kills, which I'll get into, in a minute. But I think it adds a really cool thing where you're not just stuck in a mansion for a second time, just going from room to room. This one kind of expands that and lets more, it opens up the realm of possibilities for more things to happen. One of the other things I really enjoy about this movie is the kills. I think, obviously if you've seen the first one, all the bodies exploding and whatnot. And that was kind of like a fun surprise in the first one where it's almost become this radio silent signature at this point, to where they used it a little bit in Abigail. And of course they're going to use it again in this one. And it can become something that you can be like, okay, I feel like we've done this enough and we're kind of, let's move on to something else. But the way that they do it in this movie with just the exploding part, they add it in a way to where they can make it more fun and make it funny, especially with the introduction of our new characters like Catherine Newton, like I said earlier, who is just going through all this for the first time. So seeing her having to go through all that and then having to maybe kill some people herself or defend herself in certain ways to help protect her sister, I think, like I said, that adds a whole new comedic thing to the movie, which I really enjoyed. With this new setting of this country club and whatnot, you have more rooms and more things you can explore, so that leads to more ways you can kind of take people out. So they kind of use that to their advantage in this movie, which is something really cool. And, just like I said, it adds something to a somewhat familiar plot that that we've seen before. They also expand a little bit more on the lore, like I mentioned earlier, about how these characters can go about doing certain things, where, as in the first movie, you just found out about the basic plot of this family and the stuff that goes on with that. In this one, they do a really good job of having the expanded family where you can, if somebody doesn't want to go be a part of the game, they can sign stuff over to a certain family member and they can go do it, or they can do things as like their spouse can go do it if they don't want to do it, if they sign everything over to them. So that also leads to a lot of comedic stuff, but also it does a great job of expanding more of this world out and more of this satanic cult thing that these people are in. So it's a really cool thing to kind of bring to it that also will add something to the movie. Again, to where it's not so wash, rinse, repeat of the first one. So it's something I really did enjoy about it. Now, with all that being said, I think this movie is a lot of reminiscent of the first one. And I think, going into this, most of us kind of knew that. But, I mean, it does bring enough of its own flavor to really merit a sequel. Like I said, especially with the introduction of Catherine Newton and the newness that she brings to it, while also giving us more family members and kind of expanding on that lore a little bit. I just think it kind of begs that question of, did we really need a sequel? And really the answer is no. But these movies are so fun that I'm kind of like, I'm cool with this. I could easily watch another one probably of this one, but they would probably have to definitely go in probably a whole different direction. There is something in this movie that I think could kind of maybe frustrate people a little bit, but also kind of, it's weird to talk about because it's something that worked for me, but I know it can really frustrate people if they really look really hard into it. But there are scenes where there is, all this chaos going on, and just, obviously Samara Weaving and Catherine Newton, they're running like hell to try to get away from craziness that's going on around them, and obviously trying to stay alive. But they take these moments throughout the movie. There's like 3 or 4 moments to where all this chaos is, ensuing. They escape and whatnot, and they stop to have these little moments with themselves to where they're trying to talk about their past and their problems and why they're so estranged from each other, which is great moments to have. I think they really build character, and they really build, they help flesh out our characters overall, where we care more about them. But I think in these situations where everything is so high stake, and they stop, and the fact that they do that 2 or 3, 4 times maybe in this movie, I can see where people are like, "What are you doing? Run, go, go! Why are you stopping to keep having these conversations with each other? Get the hell out of there!" But also, I think their relationship with each other is really the heart and soul of this entire movie. I think without it, it really wouldn't work, because that's really mainly what this movie is focused on. But I can feel like a lot of people, it's going to be so up and down like this for a lot of people, where you have these moments and it kind of brings you down, have these moments, brings you down. And like I said, I think it's going to take people out of it, because you kind of have to suspend your disbelief a lot, which I know already going into these movies, you really already have to suspend your disbelief as it is. But I think with those character moments like that, as much as I love them and enjoyed them, I can easily see where it's going to take people out of it so much, because it happens so often throughout. But still, at the end of the day, it's something that I really enjoyed, because like I said, I love the conversations between the two of them. I thought those scenes were really well done. I just think they could have been maybe put somewhere else, or kind of done differently, to where it's not so like up and down with the tone and the tension throughout. Now, there is also a scene near the end of the movie that I'm not going to get into, but it has something where it kind of expands yet again more of the lore. And I feel like maybe the more that they go in a particular route, they can kind of get bogged down, especially if they decide to do more sequels with maybe more family or however many people's in this cult. I think eventually it is cool to expand the lore of stuff like this, but I think if it keeps going long enough, that I think it will eventually get to the point to where it's ridiculous and kind of bog itself down so much to where you're like, what the hell is going on with the lore in this? But in this movie, it's done just enough, but they introduce kind of more stuff there near the end, where these are the rules, this is what can happen and what can't happen, to where you're like, okay, if you do make more of these, you're going to have to really follow up on that. And I said that can get really confusing after so long. But if they really stick with just the 2, I think we'll be okay. Or maybe 3. They might push it a little bit more in 3. I don't know if we get a 3rd. I'm not saying we are, but I'm just saying it's one of those things to where if it kept going, I think it would really start to bog itself down in its lore and its world and its just overall rules of what you can and can't do in this game. But as of right now, it's still something you could easily just kind of, look over and be like, this is still a fun time. While this is not a mixed thing or really a negative by any means, I think this movie definitely is more comedic than the first one. Like I said, when you introduce new characters and you introduce especially a sibling angle, it is definitely more of a comedic movie than it is a horror movie. There is a few moments of tension, not a lot by any means, but there is a few moments of that, and I wish we got just a little bit more tension. But these movies like this are really hitched on the comedic side of them as well, and it's something Radio Silence does really well. Again, with like Abigail, I thought they did very well. So I was really invested in that, and I really enjoy the comedy in this movie. Like I said, especially the stuff with the dynamic between the siblings and whatnot that brings, and especially the parts where Samara Weaving has just had enough of it, and she's just like, fuck it. So she decides to go on this, essentially the rage that she had near the end of the first movie, so it's cool to bring that back. So if you're a big fan of Ready or Not 1, I can easily see you liking this one. I can't really see a huge like shift in the break of that, where you're like, where somebody absolutely hates the second one. There might be some people like that out there. I totally get it. Some things work, but it's in the same vein almost as the first one. So I don't know. I just can't see a really huge divide on this one, but I could be wrong. But if you like the first one, I would say definitely go see this one, because it's, like I said, it's pretty much almost the same movie, just with some new stuff added in. So this is one that I would highly recommend going to check out at the theater. Like I said, it's just a lot of fun. It's worth your time. It's a fun date night movie. And if you're looking for one of those movies where you can just turn your brain off and have a really good time at the theater, this is your movie. So thank you, everybody. That's my review for Ready or Not 2. If this is the review that you're finding me on, please come over and check out all my other reviews for 2026 so far. I have a pretty good catalog so far, and obviously I have a whole back catalog of reviews from 2025. If you would like to check those out, I'd be much appreciative. And as always, if you have seen Ready or Not 2, let me know what you thought about it down below, what moments you had fun with, if you enjoyed the first one more, if you like this one more, or if they're both kind of in the same vein for you. And as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. That way I can see all of you in the next one. Thank you so very much.